Playground.
Hooray!
Hey everybody, it's Harvey Levin from TMZ. You know TMZ for breaking so many stories in pop culture. Now you can check us out Monday through Friday on the TMZ podcast. Stay up to date on all the latest news in pop culture and sports and entertainment and politics, social justice. And you can do that with the TMZ podcast. We're breaking lots of stories and some pretty shocking moments. You can check out the TMZ podcast Monday through Friday right here on Spotify.
Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and welcome to another episode of Celebrity Jobber. Oh, this is going to be a good one here. My friend, comedian Rich Voss. You probably know him best from the first season of Last Comic Standing. He was the first white comedian to perform on Def Comedy Jam on HBO. Frequent guest on Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn on Comedy Central. The Opie and Anthony radio show. And his podcast with his wife, very famous comedian Bonnie McFarlane, which is called My Wife Hates Me. If it wasn't for comedy, what would this guy be doing? What kind of jobs did he have outside of comedy? What was his first job? And what was his big break? I know he's definitely going to say, not this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, major headliner, comedian Rich Voss, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
I probably right now am known for my shirts that I sell at richvoss.com.
Yeah, what are those?
Rich Voss, it says legend on them.
Oh, okay. Can you send me one of those? Gratis?
No. I have to support my family, and my kids, or my daughter now, my older daughters are grown. I can't say, hey, no dinner tonight, Zito, a free shirt. I'd like to, but at this point in my life, until you show me some type of return, whether it be if 100 people from this podcast order a shirt, I'll send you a hoodie.
Okay. All right. Is it zipped down in the middle, or is it one of those with the pocket and the stomach?
It's a pullover.
Okay. All right. It'll do.
I don't like the zip down hoodies.
Why not? The zip downs are cool.
I'm wearing one right now, but I don't like it. Actually, it says Oscars on it because I wrote on 2 Oscars.
Well, there's something you're known for. That would have been good to mention a few minutes ago.
Well, that's true, but I'm not going to, bore your listener with a long line of credits. Google Rich Voss and you'll be there all night reading my credits.
Rich is also known for being married to a major headliner, and her name is Bonnie McFarlane, and she is obviously, very famous, and she's done movies, and Rich is kind of along for the ride there. Good move on your part. It's so hacky that you would go, oh, he's along for the ride with his wife. Shut your stupid mouth. She has a great career. We were both in a movie together, King of Staten Island. Did you see that movie? Yeah, I did. You were in that? Oh,
you're so stupid. Me and her, we were the ones that were ordering food in the Italian restaurant, and he was the waiter.
Yes. Sorry, Rich. It was, it wasn't a huge part. I apologize, but I do remember seeing it because my wife said, look who it is.
Yes, it was a decent part, and we were up for an Oscar for Best Cameo.
Is that a real thing? Best Cameo?
No. Oh. No, it was. We'd be up for an Oscar. That's how good it was.
All right, I want to get into a little bit with you here because this podcast is called Celebrity Jobber, and it basically dives deep. I don't know too much about your growing up. I know a little bit. You grew up in the same, not the same neighborhood that I grew up in. I was in the Watchung Mountains just next door in a nicer part of town, but you grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Yes, pretty tough neighborhood.
Very tough neighborhood.
Very, I would say, way way more diverse than where you grew up.
Yes.
I say our town was, I don't know, 70% minorities and 30% white and a Jew, me. And so, yeah, I grew up in it was a great place to grow up in. We grew up playing sports and, our neighborhoods playing other neighborhoods and going to playgrounds as a kid. And, but then you grow up and you're hanging out with other dysfunctional kids and, you start smoking pot and then you end up, giving head for crack.
Which we'll get into a little later down the road here. But tell me, go ahead.
Well, hold on. I've lived in Hillsborough for 16 years, but I always say I'm from Plainfield. That's where I'm from.
Right.
And there's some, major people. Parliament Funkadelics are from Plainfield.
That's right.
There's a lot of professional athletes. I don't know any offhand. Mill Campbell, who won a gold medal in the Olympics from Plainfield years ago. But there's a lot of athletes from Plainfield that went to the pros. It was a cool town as well. During the 67 riots throughout the country, Chicago, Newark, Watts, Plainfield was part of that too.
Yeah.
Major riots. So I lived through, a block where, as a kid, the older people on the block were heroin addicts, and you'd hear guns go off and police cars, and, it was just young kids and playing sports, and those guys all grew up, went to jail or got shot or overdosed. And, then we grew up, and then we weren't as wild as the older kids that grew up on my block.
So tell me a little bit about your mom and your dad. Were your mom and your dad together while you were growing up?
No.
They weren't. Who did you live with?
My mom, divorced. Matter of fact, I just called my father's wife, who he's been married to for 40 years. He's in kind of a hospital nursing home. He's 94.
Oh, wow.
And he really doesn't walk. He refuses to walk. He can walk with a walker, but I guess at 94, maybe some people just give up at 94 and just say, fuck it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That he doesn't want to go through some type of walking rehab. And, I guess, at 94, you already won. You won. I mean, what my dad taught me was how to be a good parent to my kids, because I did just the opposite of what he did.
So you weren't close growing up with your dad?
Well, he wasn't around. It was my mom who took care of us, and 3 kids, and she was a secretary. So luckily we lived for free. My grandparents owned a multi-family house, so we lived for free on the second floor. There's no possible way she would have made ends meet if we had to pay rent somewhere. You know what I mean? A secretary raising 3 kids.
Yeah, single mother. Yeah. How many and brothers and sisters? What do you have?
I have a sister, and I had a brother. He passed away.
Okay, how long ago did your brother pass away?
What time is it? 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. And your sister, what does she do?
She's done public relations. She's worked for big drug companies, and she's one of those people that made a lot of money, who's never had kids, but very wealthy or very well off.
Good.
Very well off, but had a $2 million house, sold it, now moved to Florida. So I guess she's semi-retired or working over, the computer, probably with some drug company or some publicist company doing that type of work. I was never really tight with my brother or sister, but real tight with my kids. You know, it's so weird how you break the chain of dysfunction in life that you grew up with. You know, some people don't break that chain of dysfunction, and dysfunction goes from one family to the next, to the next. And I broke it. My two older daughters one's married with a kid, the other one's married. They have nice houses. One owns a house in Florida that she Airbnb. You know, they're doing great. And my 15-year-old is a 15-year-old. You know,
wow.
She's still a straight-A student. So my ex-wife, who was a great mom, and myself raised two kids, you know, through a divorce. But I learned through divorce that you don't use your kids as chess pieces. And I had my kids in the day, and she had them at nights. And you know, we did our own contract during divorce because we didn't have anything that you needed lawyers. You know what I mean?
Right.
Plus, lawyers make money by making you fight. So we did our own contract, and she had them on Christmas, and I had them Thanksgiving. But, you know, we were separated for 5 years, and I would spend Christmas Eve at their house, wake up. Anyhow, my kids grew up to be very, I guess, stable. You know, for a divorced parents, they grew up pretty stable.
So tell me a little bit about school. And did you go to college?
I go to college. I was in English class in 10th grade, and I asked for a pass to go to the bathroom, and I never came back. I took a fucking pass, and I walked outside, and I said, fuck this. No.
So college was not a part of your well, what did you think you wanted to do when you were in high school? I mean, obviously, tell me about how you got into comedy and when that was in your mind.
Tell me about, first of all, I will, but tell me about, do you bore everybody else with these stupid questions? I'll tell you. I mean, my grandfather was a contractor, so I started working for him, and I started my own business. And I had the biggest painting business in town at like 22 years old. I had 7, 8 employees, you know, doing gigantic Victorian houses. I had the biggest painting business in my town, and I, you know, kind of fucked it up doing drugs and partying. You know, I mean, I was just partying at that. You know, you go to the bar, stay out all night, then you get up. I would get up and set the crew up and then just go to the park and sleep because I was so out of it. But I had a really, really big contracting business, you know, ladders and trucks and power washer and spray, you know, spray gun, the first spray gun that came out for painters I bought, you know, but I owed everyone money. I owed every paint store money, you know, and it just fell apart. And then I, you know, started partying too much and doing different types of sales and whatever to scam and get by, you know.
Right.
But, you know, I started comedy. I started open mics. And for like, I think maybe 2 years, you know, I was partying. Then I got into freebasing or crack or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, I was running with comics that would do that. And, you know, it was just, you know, hanging out with other comics. Like I used to hang out with one guy who was a heroin addict and I was a coke, you know, and just work and get high. And then finally I just said enough is enough and I went to rehab. And next month I'll have 37 years sober.
Good, man. So you didn't start, you partied did you party like when you were in the painting business, or did you just like kind of recreational drink, get high while you were doing the painting? And then when you started doing some comedy, is that when you know, got kind of deep into crack and all that shit?
Yeah. I mean, we partied through, you know, from 15 on, but it progresses like anything. You know, you don't, you know, people go, well, pot's legal. And so, you know, not too many people start off doing meth or heroin. They start off, you know, to me, pot and alcohol is a gateway drug if you have that type of personality, if that's the kind of person you are, an addictive person. So, yeah, when I was painting, I partied and did coke and, whatever way you can scam and get more and sell it, but don't sell it. You end up doing it all and owing people money. I owed this one guy money, and he torched my mother's car.
Oh, boy.
And then I called him. I said, not only now you're not getting paid, we're going to get a car from insurance. I mean, I put my mother through hell, and mainly my mother, not my father.
Right.
And getting sober and then getting married and having kids and giving her grandkids, I guess, was the best amends I can make to my mother.
I'd say so. So tell me about comedy. You started comedy. You're doing the painting. What made you want to get into comedy? Were you just a funny guy? Did people just say, oh, you're a funny guy, you should go do stand-up? Was it something that you were a big fan of growing up? How did you get into it?
If I was sitting next to you, I would try to punch you in the fucking head.
Why? I'm having like a really deep conversation with you.
Shut up. I tell you what's deep. I wish you were in deep water in the middle of fucking. First of all, between painting and comedy, there was probably 8 years, 7 years. And I just, growing up, I always loved comedy, but I listened to comedy as a kid. I used to come home from school in 4th grade, and I would put this comedy album on, Von Meter. You won't know who that was, but he did impressions of the Kennedys. He had an album called The First Family. And once the Kennedys were assassinated, this guy was fucking over. He was one of the highest selling albums for comics back then. And then when the Kennedys were assassinated, nobody wanted to be reminded.
Right.
And he went the same from Park Avenue to Park Bench and died a full-blown alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
And I used to come home from school in 4th grade and every day listen to the album and just sit next to the Victrola. Is that what they called them back then? Where you put the
record player?
Yeah, record player, Victrola, I think it was called, or record player. But I would laugh, and then later on in life, you just figure out, well, I was doing that to cover the pain of my parents being divorced. I'm in 4th grade. I don't know. Where's my father? I always loved comedy growing up, watching it on TV. And, of course, most people my age would get high and listen to Pryor. Then Eddie Murphy came along. I never was big on Carlin growing up.
No.
It was always Pryor and Murphy, mainly Pryor. I mean, so fucking funny. We'd sit up in my friend's room and smoke pot and listen to Pryor and just crack up, And then, I don't know, this coke dealer, friend of mine, I just said, we went to a couple shows in New York, Catch a Rising Star, and just watched the comedy shows. I go, I really want to do this. And I wrote a bunch of stuff I remember on paper. I wish I had it still with pencil. And it was horrific. And my friend had a band. And they let me go on the first time during break. And I remember I had props, and it was horrific. Horrific.
Did you bomb?
Well, yeah. I mean, people laughed because it was so bad, so dumb.
Right.
I mean, I took this doll and I cut the arms off it so it had arms and little hands, and I would put them up my hands up my sleeves, and I would hold on to the arms, and I came out with these little hands, and I go, let's have a big hand for, Eddie. And I saw this one comic, he was a prop comic, Lenny Schultz. I could do that. I went to Toys R Us and bought a bunch of, and I had no jokes. Just these dumb fucking, and I go, what the fuck? And I remember doing a show with this comic who did, like, 14 Carsons, this comic David Say. And he did 14 Carsons back then. Very funny, prolific writer, and he said, I remember the first piece of advice, he said, don't do props. Just do material, don't do props. Then I worked with him years later, in Vegas, and when I started comedy, I booked a couple rooms, one-nighters. This way I could host every week and get on and practice. And then other guys that booked one-nighters in like Connecticut or New York, I would let them host my show and they would give me theirs. We would trade gigs, And then I worked my way into doing this fucking ridiculous podcast. I fucking worked 39 years to get to the point where I'm sitting in my basement talking to some fly-by-night jackass in the middle of nowhere. 12 listeners trying to sell a fucking T-shirt.
Listen, let me ask you this. What do you think? What do you think your big break was with all of this? You're telling me how you started. You're a prop comic. I mean, when did you get that call, or what was your big break to where things changed for you? Maybe, financially, just everything.
I think my biggest was when I got separated from my first wife, and then I could go into New York more.
Okay.
And work the New York clubs, which led to everything. Def Comedy Jam, Last Comic Standing. Because I was doing stand-up for 10 years on the road and one-nighters. So when I went into New York with 10 years under my belt, I was killing everywhere. You know what I mean? I wasn't like some new comic breaking into New York. I was already doing it for 10 years. So, I got into Caroline's and all the clubs. Every single one I auditioned for or tried to get in, I worked every club right away. So that led to everything. So, doing Def Jam as the first white comic was big. Last Comic Standing, which I turned down, but then Jay Moore talked me into it. It was his show at the time. He said, you got to do this. And I was already doing Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn. I was on Opie and Anthony, which they had a lot of heat back then. They had heat and Tough Crowd. And then I was offered Last Comic Standing, and I said, and I turned it down, but then I was talked into it, which I'm glad I was. I mean, it was a big hit the first season.
Yeah.
So there was that was the biggest thing at the time, was doing Last Comic, because it was a network TV show. Everywhere I went, people would recognize me. My daughters were young. They would get mad. They would go, quit staring at him. Callers. Right? So that was the biggest, because network television, prime time, you couldn't get any bigger than that.
That was a big show, too. Like you said, the first couple seasons, they were big.
I mean, the first season was really big because no one's ever seen anything like that, And, it was great doing it. I did it. I didn't care about comedy. I just wanted to show just different sides of me, being versatile and being funny as a character on the show. You know what I mean?
Who won that season? Who won that show?
The Asian kid, Dat Fan.
Oh, Dat Fan. Okay, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, we did a tour after that. I mean, we were selling out. We were selling out theaters, me and two other comics and clubs. And this is before the internet. This is, before Twitter, Instagram. Facebook.
Before social media, yeah.
If we had that back then, you know what I mean? It would have been crazier.
Right.
All we had was television. Now, television doesn't even mean as much as YouTube now. Look how big some of these people are just from YouTube and TikTok.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Like there's, or podcasts. There's, to me, there's podcasters that do comedy, or there's comedians that do podcasts. which is a big difference. You know, you'll get funny comedians like Tim Dillon, who's a great comedian, does a pie. I mean, he probably makes $1 million a month or whatever. Who knows? You know, Andrew Schultz. A lot of them that are funny, but then you'll get people that just do podcasts. Then they go, well, I'm going to do comedy now, you know, and they're not as good.
So you're trying to tell me don't do comedy is what you're trying to tell me?
No. Come to think of it, yes, but I wasn't. But now, but I don't really consider this a podcast until you get 100 listeners at least.
You're this. You know what? You talked about your big break. Who knows? This could be your next big break. You could sell 100,000 T-shirts. Who knows? This could be it.
I could listen. If I'll call my guy tomorrow that sells them. You go to richfoss.com. And he'll tell me the numbers in 2 days.
Okay.
Now, when does this podcast go up?
Well, it'll air. It'll go up on Friday. So, give it a week, will you?
Okay, so next week I'll call him, and you can follow up.
Okay, I'll follow up with you.
richfoss.com, and you order a shirt or a hoodie.
And that's one S, right? richvos.com.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure we got the correct spelling out there for people.
Yes, that's my website. You could order a shirt. I just put out my 7th album. You know, I keep creating and writing. I mean, since the 7th album came out, I've been kind of coasting because I don't know what I want to do next. You know, do I want to just tell stories, or do more jokes, or do all crowd? I mean, I can go on stage and for an hour just do crowd work off the top of my head.
Well, that's probably one of the biggest reasons I like you personally. I think you're funny because you don't need any material. If you've ever seen Rich do stand-up, he goes on stage and he doesn't need to have any jokes prepared. He just starts picking people out of the audience, which reminds me, I got a good friend of mine that owns a pizza place. He's got a couple different pizza places. He's a very successful guy, great pizza. And he said to me, he was a big fan of Opie and Anthony, and he said to me he was in Vegas and he wanted to see you perform, and he ended up going to see you perform. And he's a bigger guy. He went to the bathroom, he came back, and as he came back, you started giving him shit. You started saying something about his size, like, well, you having a diabetes attack, and he remembered it, though, and he was telling me all about it a few weeks ago, so.
Well, what I said must have been funny, but you got to be careful when there's certain things you can go after or not go after. You know, weight is a tough one. I keep away from that now because people struggle with it. You know, like if you got a fucked up hairdo, that's on you.
Right.
And it's so weird. It's so weird now. Like if someone was in the audience drunk out of their mind or high on heroin, you could fucking easily go after them and know, oh, you know, they're drunk or they're drug addict. But food is an addiction too. But once you go after somebody who's overweight, you know, it's tough. That's a tough one. You got to be really careful. I mean, I was doing an urban show once years and years ago, and this girl, I guess, was about 400 pounds, and she started booing me. And I go, booing? You should be mooing. And in an urban audience, that killed. White people would cringe. I'm just saying urban audiences are, you could be more, I don't know about now. This is back then when I used to do a lot of, I guess, urban shows, black shows. Back then, you had to be tough. You couldn't show fear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Different. It's different, whatever. What's the word? I can't think of it. I mean, it's just different upbringings or different audience. That's all. You know, it's just different.
Do you have to like censor yourself now, like because things have changed so much in the last 5 years, and maybe when you first started doing comedy, you could get away with a lot more things. Do you have to because I'm sure comedians are afraid of getting canceled because this cancel culture is such a big thing.
Well, you can't cancel me because I don't have anything to cancel. Fucking take away next week in Arizona? Please, I don't want to go anyhow. Now with social media, everybody, is a reviewer all of a sudden. Everybody has a blog or everybody has an opinion. Shut your fucking mouth. Don't go out to a show. Do some research. Know who you're going to see. Don't go to a show and go, I'm offended, and you didn't know who you were going to see. Go to YouTube. And yeah, there's stuff I won't say, or there's stuff I will say. I don't, you know what I mean? It's just, there's a fight. Look, I've always had it anyhow. There's certain things I wouldn't say. And there's times I cross the line, I just don't want people to leave hurt or upset. I want them to leave, having a good time. If somebody walks in and say they have polio or walk, you're not going to make fun of that.
Sure, of course.
But I've had people in wheelchairs heckle me, and I go, I've said stuff. You know what I mean? I remember one time I was on stage and got in a wheelchair, just set up. And also, too, people in a wheelchair, a lot of them, they just don't want to be seen any different. They want to. And I go, who's the guy next to you? He was my bodyguard. I go, well, he's not doing a good job. It depends. You really got to know. See, listen, I've been doing this for fucking 39 years. So I know people. I know how to read people. I know how to read an audience. I know. You can't just, you know what I mean? I know what I'm going to say next as I'm saying one thing.
Right.
I just know. Look, when you go see a band, they know their next song. I know where I'm going 9 out of 10 times. Unless I'm doing crowd work, and then it's just, I'm ad-libbing, but I still know what I'm going to follow it with.
Do you ever think about what you might be doing if you weren't doing comedy? Like, because you got to admit, like, not everybody can be a stand-up comic and make a good living at it. Be in a movie like The King of Staten Island with Pete Davidson. Like that's kind of pie in the sky kind of thing. So did you ever think about what you were going to do if the comedy never worked out?
I'd probably be in sales or in jail for insider trading. I don't know. I would have been doing some kind of sales, because, I had skills when it came to remodeling or painting or roofing, but I wasn't going to do that the rest of that's a scary question if I think about it. What would it would have been some type of sales. I might end up I sold cars at points in my life. I could have been one of those fucking jamokes or selling insurance or real estate. I did go to real estate school, but I fell asleep the first day. I did. This real estate company, they paid half or whatever for me to go to real estate class, and I actually fell asleep in it, and then I never went back. I'd probably be in real estate somehow.
What was your first job?
Well, in high school, working at this wood shop, Clem's. Everybody in Plainfield worked. Clem's Iron Works. And I worked either dipping railings into paint or staining the wood that went above railings, how some railings would have wood. I did that, and I worked in this one company. Then I worked building tennis courts. I worked pouring zinc into molds, from a kettle that boiled zinc and melted zinc, and make these molds that you put on the bottom of ships to stop erosion. I did all kinds of shit. Hot tar, that only lasted about a week, the hot tar. I quit. I fell asleep at work.
Boy, you got a problem falling asleep. You got narcolepsy?
During now I do. Do everything to keep my eyes open. I remember we had lunch, this hot tar company, and during lunch I fell asleep, and they never woke me up. I woke up at like 3 o'clock. I go, nobody, and they were all dicks to me, and I said, fuck you, and I just hitchhiked home. So I left that job. I remember working for this one carpenter. He was such a dick. Then I went back at night and I stole his sawzall and another power tool. Then I caddied and at this real waspy country club, and I think I dropped the guy's bag and walked away.
Wow, the working world, you weren't cut out for the working world. Good thing things worked out for you.
Well, as having my own business, I was good. I did sales for a while. We did canvas sales, selling house plans and renting vans. But I ended up owing everybody money because I would just take the money and party and buy Coke or pot or whatever, I had no direction in life. So I guess once I went to rehab, and I finished rehab, I go, this is, 5-day detox and 28-day program. I go, I'm good. I'm not leaving. And it was really the first thing I really finished, and the day I got out of rehab, they said you can't do comedy for a year. Stop, because I'm around alcohol.
Yeah.
And the day I got out of rehab, I did a show that night because when I went to rehab, I completely surrendered to my addiction. I really wanted to stop no matter what. Now, yes, I'm an alcoholic, but that wasn't my drug of choice. So if I went back to work and everybody was in the club freebasing, I probably couldn't have done it. You know what I mean? But drinking wasn't my drug of choice. Yes, I don't drink because it would lead back to my drug of choice. But if everybody was doing coke in the club, I remember I was doing a show in Tampa. No, it was, I think, St. Pete, anywhere, Clearwater, somewhere. And I probably had like 2 months clean. And I pick up this waitress, we go back to she was fucking amazing. And I'm making out with her, and a weird taste. And I go, what is, and she pulls out a bag of Coke. It must have been about a quarter ounce. I go, look, you're going to have to leave. I mean, after we have sex. And she left. We had sex. I go, you got to, so I guess, once I got clean, like there's nothing more important to me in life than staying clean, because if I don't, then I lose everything. I mean, my gambling is out of hand, a little out of hand, football, I bet, 100 here, 100 there to watch the games.
That's nothing.
Well, it is, because I'm addicted to instant gratification. I don't have one pair of sneakers. I have 40. So I don't get high or drink a day at a time, but I also am fucked up in other ways. So, I don't say no to people who go, will you do my podcast? I don't know how to say no.
Well, you can be a jerk all you want and act like you hate me, but I know deep down, I know how you feel about me. You take my call, you call me back. It could be a few years that we don't talk, but you like me. You do.
Of course I don't hate you. Just what you think I dislike every failure I know. No, I love you as a person. Are you kidding me? I just, you know what I mean? I want to help you.
I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate you doing this. My Wife Hates Me is the name of Rich's podcast with him and his wife, Bonnie McFarlane. It's very funny. Check that out. And I'll be talking to you soon. Come down here. We'll play golf. And it's on me this time.
Oh, it's on your brother.
Yeah, well, whatever. You don't know him. I do.
Well, listen, thank you for having me. richvoss.com.
You should share this on your socials.
I'd rather share mono.
All right. Thanks for your help. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. We have to do this at least monthly.
Oh, boy. There you have it. Man, I had no idea what kind of working history he had. When he was telling me that he fell asleep in real estate school, that didn't surprise me too much, but worked as a painter, had his own painting business, was pretty successful at it. I had no idea. Fell into comedy while he was, in his 20s. Funny enough, his big break was getting separated from his then wife because he was now able to go into New York City to perform at some of the clubs. So when he was with his wife at the time, he'd have to do like little one-off gigs, flying here, flying there. But then when he separated from her, he could go into New York City and work the clubs. And with 10 years of experience behind him, he found it, he was pretty successful. And when you're pretty successful in the New York City clubs, in the world of comedy, that's pretty major. I mean, I can't think of all the jobs that he went through, selling canvas, working at the ironworks. Was it Clem's? Sometimes have trouble understanding him with those giant veneers he has. But I think for a moment, when I asked him, what do you think you'd be doing if comedy didn't work out for you? He really stopped and thought about it for a minute and was like, oh man, you know what? I haven't really thought about that. He went on to say probably sales. Rich has a gift of gab, selling insurance, selling cars, which I believe was another one of his jobs. Sales probably most likely what you'd be seeing Rich Voss do if it wasn't for comedy. But thank God, comedy's been good to him. One of my top 3 favorite comedians of all time, and that's the truth. I'm not going to tell him that. But in my book, I put him up with Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor all day long. Maybe he'll send me one of those t-shirts now. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe wherever you pod. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Celebrity Jobber. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jeff Zito.